Hi friends, things in Minneapolis aren't good. It feels a little surreal to record a happy podcast when my neighbors are scared, my friends are scared, my waiter at the restaurant is scared, doors are locked, my local McDonald's is not open. It's just hard here now. But I do think that we all need a few stories about what's going on. So let me tell you what happened yesterday. Yesterday I taught a class at Knit and Bolt in Northeast Minneapolis for one student. And Megan, the shop owner, who has always been so supportive of me, she had my books in her shop. She always asks me to come back to teach. And she has a very small shop where she sells vintage fabrics and a few skeins of yarn. They teach sewing classes and they are a neighborhood community. Could Megan have canceled the class because there was only one student signed up? Yes. But this woman, Linda, really wanted to take my class. She had tried to sign up a couple of times and it was full. People don't want to go into Minneapolis right now. And our temperatures are frigid. So winter in January is hard here. People often kind of hibernate and stay in. So all the local yarn stores are struggling. And they all closed on Friday in support of trying to get ice out of Minnesota. They lost money that day. And yesterday, Megan lost a ton of money because I could have had 8 students in that class. But she paid me my full fee. And so Linda and I, my new friend, decided that we would both purchase something on our way out to try to help her to recoup the fact that she paid me more than Linda paid to take the class. When I was leaving, I noticed that there were 50 skeins of yarn left over from the spring shop hop sitting by the front door in a discounted basket. And Megan showed me what she was knitting with it, a poncho, and said, people didn't like that it was yellow. And so I said, I like that it's yellow. And I bought 6 skeins of fiber Macgyver, honeycomb colorway in merino alpaca, 80% merino and 20% alpaca, 190 yards to 100 grams. So just a little bit heavier than worsted weight. It's lovely. I think if I knit this in a big enough circumference, I can get it to micro stripe. So big brown with little yellow stripes. Most of it, if you do it in a smaller circumference, will pool. But I asked people on Instagram if they would go over to Megan's shop and buy some yarn. She has a website at knitandbolt.com. Or go to any Minneapolis yarn store and I'll have a list of all of the local yarn stores and their websites here, and buy a skein of yarn. Or a notions pouch. I also bought a really cute little notions pouch from Megan. Look at this. It's just darling. This was also marked down from regular of $15 to $7.50. It doesn't cost a lot to lift their spirits and try to kind of support them right now in some way, shape, or form. I'm getting a number of messages on my Instagram that people have gone over and bought yarn from Megan. So I hope she goes into the shop on Monday morning with a bunch of orders to fill. They are all out of red yarn. And in Minneapolis, knitters are knitting red hats. They're buying red yarn and knitting red hats. And there's a story out on Instagram about that. My friend Renee, who's been on the podcast, Knitroverted, reposted that story this morning. So I'll tell you what it says. In the 1940s, Norwegians made and wore red pointed hats with a tassel as a form of visual protest against Nazi occupation of their country. Within 2 weeks, the Nazis made these protest hats illegal and punishable by law to wear, make, or distribute. So one of the local yarn stores, Needle and Skein, developed a pattern for a tasseled hat and just said, hey, let's knit a red hat. If you're feeling like you can't do anything else, there's nothing you can do to help or support, knit a red hat. And so a lot of the local yarn stores were kind of inundated to get red yarn, and they weren't ready for that. They weren't thinking, oh my gosh, I need a whole bunch of red yarn. So Knit and Bolt has run out of red yarn. Please don't call them and ask them for red yarn. They were getting several calls yesterday when I was in the shop. But I knit at a pizza every Thursday and have for many years. And our waiter is a young man of color, and he has a family, and he is of Hmong descent. And on Thursday, when he was taking our checks around the table, "Are you okay?" And he said, "No, it's been really hard. Our back door is locked. Many of our kitchen staff are too afraid to come in. And my family has been rounded up and has been detained, but released." He said that in St. Paul, the entire Hmong village was kind of completely leveled. All of the business have been closed by the ICE roundups, and people have been being detained. And what is mostly happening here is that they are being detained for 8 to 10 hours and then being released. The agents are not checking their papers or their documents. They're just taking them in. And then they're sitting in jail cells with other people who all have papers and waiting and waiting and waiting. And many times their families or loved ones don't know where they're at. Some personal experiences with what's going on. His mother, who came here as a refugee after the Silent War, works here full-time in Minnesota and has a permanent resident visa. She has been told that that is no longer valid. Can you imagine? They're making decisions willy-nilly, and it's really hard to know what is going to change the next day. All that to say, it's hard to know where to give money, what organizations to give it to, where you can help. We are protesting. We are standing up for our neighbors, but that's scary too. You don't know if you're going to get yourself in trouble or get someone else in trouble. So people who were delivering meals were leading agents to the homes where they were delivering the meals. So you think you're doing the right thing, and then you're not suddenly. I don't want this to be a complete downer, but I did want to say something on the record and make sure that people understand that these are young boys. These are young men who are being paid for a quota of people. It doesn't not matter whether or not the people that they arrest are detained permanently. They still get paid if they bring a person in and they're released later. So it's become about the numbers. The last story I'm going to tell you is that 2 women were riding in the back of a police car. They had been handcuffed. Every day in Northeast Minneapolis, they go at 3 o'clock and patrol the neighborhoods to make sure that all the children who get off the bus in this frigid cold temperatures are getting home, that they're getting picked up, and that their parents or family members are at home when they arrive there. These 2 women were arrested by ICE officers for getting in the way. And as they were sitting in the back of this truck, the ICE officer in the passenger seat started to have a seizure. So they came online after they were released with I believe they got a fine for trespassing. And she said to the driver, "You need to pull over, he's having a seizure." And he had said, "I don't feel well." And he was starting to choke. And both of these women knew CPR. But the younger man that was driving the truck did not pull over right away. And she said, "He's going to choke and die." And so he pulled over and they called 911. And the 2 women got out and they unlocked their handcuffs and they helped him. They rolled him on his side so that he wouldn't choke. And they were with him and told him that he was going to be okay. and they were talking to him as he lost consciousness. They could tell that he was really scared and he didn't know what was going on. And afterwards, they were re-handcuffed and taken to the detention center. And she said, all in that moment I saw was a young man who was scared, and he was a human. It just, you can't tell these stories without feeling like something is wrong here. I will continue to do a little bit of a podcast here, but if you would like to go over and buy any skein of yarn, they also sell fabric on their website at Knit and Volt. They sell embroidery kits, they sell cross-stitch kits, they have mini skeins, they have bags. There are all kinds of things that you can purchase from them, and I just want to lift her up. She closed her shop early yesterday and posted on Instagram that it was just too much, and she just needed to go home. So she was also closed for a few hours yesterday. Some of our local yarn stores are some of the best places that provide community in this city. People get together and knit, they talk about yarn, they go together with other friends and have lunch and then go to the yarn store. And so I just want to support them in whatever way I can. Please try to do that with me. I'm going to put in some pictures here of the Up North Fiber Retreat and where I was last weekend in Bemidji, Minnesota, where it was 20 below zero and so cold, just to kind of transition into some information I'm going to give you about some patterns, because I do believe that we all need a little escape right now. And so you can stop watching and just go and shop. Or you can keep watching because you just don't want to think about it for a few minutes of your day, especially if you live here. And I will come back in a few minutes and just do a real short little updated podcast for this week. Thanks so much for listening. Okay, I'm shaking it off. I'm back. I took a few minutes here, and I just am going to share a few things that I finished in the last couple weeks and just try to be a little upbeat for those of you that really like to watch my podcast every other week and hear me chatter on about my passion for yarn and color. If you're new here, welcome. The beginning of this podcast was not typical, but since I live in a suburb of Minneapolis, St. Paul, I felt it was necessary. Another interruption. My mother called, so I needed to chat with her. What am I wearing today? This is my Bada Bing Pontini. It is one of my favorite knits. I designed this years ago. It's just a little shoulder wrap. It just goes down to your elbows. It's great for over your pajamas in the evening or just sitting around or being out and about, because you can absolutely move your arms from the elbows down. If you lift your arms above your head, it will, you know, lift up, but I did have a couple of gals make it a little shorter, and I had a gal make it longer. All those projects are out on Ravelry, but yeah, I really like this because it's very colorful for winter, right? That's what we like. I finished a hat, and perfect timing, right? Because I finished a chunky hat. This is the Gushy Garter hat. I bought 2 skeins of Spincycle Plump when I was in Portland, Oregon. I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but it was my colors, orange and raspberry. It was bright and colorful. And then I went and heard 2 podcasters from the Chicago area talk about their design journeys, Park Williams and Jessie May. I came home with these 2 skeins and went over and found this hat pattern by Park Williams. And I thought, I'm not a huge fan of garter stitch, but this was very fun to knit. It's got this big, thick band that you knit, and then it has this slip stitch that goes up both sides. Of course, if I wasn't using variegated yarn, that would show a little more. But I love how this pom-pom came out with purple on each side. It just did that all by itself. I didn't have anything to do with that. But yeah, so you could hold worsted weight double or DK weight with worsted, or hold some strands together to get the gauge for this hat. But it was a very quick knit. It was fun to knit. I ended up using quite a bit of the yarn up in order to make that pom-pom because it's very dense. This is my Hotdish cowl. They did a Brienne Moody knit along for the Up North Fiber Retreat, and this was not finished in time. But it's really a cute stitch pattern. It is double thick, so it's knit in a tube. It took 4 skeins of yarn. I have a new sweater pattern coming out this week. I'm going to the DarnKnitAnyway sweater camp, and Sam of Lavender Loon and I did a collaboration, and so this is Tiffany's sweater. I've had Tiffany on the podcast, and she is often a sample knitter for Sam, and so she knit 2 of these sweaters. This is her personal sample, and then I will also have Sam's sweater, which is green with wood beads. And then this is the first sample that I knit, and it has the 1 row of beads. The second sample has 3 rows of beads that kind of form a little diamond shape. And then the last sample, which I am just finishing the second sleeve on so I can take pictures tomorrow, hopefully. This is the 3rd sample, which has 4 rows of random beads, tiny and big, small and big. And I picked blue, green, pink, orange, and gold. And then I used also that color palette in the small beads. Within the pattern, there is a bead information sheet so that you can get all the information you need to find the number of beads and the kind of beads that you want to include in your sweater. Tiffany put the beads at the bottom of her sleeves, and on this one, I put just 3 beads at the bottom of this. So you can put a round of beads at the bottom of the sleeves and the body or not. This is a yoked sweater pattern that switches about 2 inches down into a raglan. So the fit is a different sort of fit for most people that don't appreciate a yoked collar. It does switch. You get your beads done in the yoke so that you don't have divisible kind of lines in between your bead. Ah, my husband. I have a new sweater pattern coming out this week. I'm going to the DarnKnitAnyway sweater camp, and Sam of Lavender Loon and I did a collaboration, and so this is Tiffany's sweater. I've had Tiffany on the podcast, and she is often a sample knitter for Sam, and so she knit 2 of these sweaters. This is her personal sample, and then I will also have Sam's sweater, which is green with wood beads. And then this is the first sample that I knit, and it has the 1 row of beads. The second sample has 3 rows of beads that kind of form a little diamond shape. And then the last sample, which I am just finishing the second sleeve on so I can take pictures tomorrow, hopefully. This is the third sample, which has 4 rows of random beads, tiny and big, small and big. And I picked blue, green, pink, orange, and gold. And then I used also that color palette in the small beads. Within the pattern, there is a bead information sheet so that you can get all the information you need to find the number of beads and the kind of beads that you want to include in your sweater. Sorry, my husband was drilling in the basement into the wall, hanging up some stuff, and it got loud. But so you start with a yoke here, and then the raglan starts so that the beads aren't interrupted by raglan increases and decreases. So I'm super excited to get all 3 of these samples knit, and then Tiffany knit 2 samples. I had over 12 testers, I think. So yeah, excited to get this big project after months off my, to-do list. I did draw a Patreon prize winner this week, and that is Susan Wright. So you can join my Patreon community at any time for $2, $4, or $10 a month. I have some skeins of baby alpaca, so soft yarn, a couple of patterns that were gifted to be given away, a plastic Notions box here that opens up on either side, and it's got some stitch markers and a little scissors in it. And then I put it all in this little bag that I thought was really cute, with a Minnesota 1 yarn sticker. I thought that was appropriate. You can get those at the Yarnery, and then a small ruler. So yeah, that is all going to Sue Wright. Congratulations, Sue. Thanks for being a Patreon subscriber. You guys help me pay my monthly business bills, and I couldn't do without you. I did read 3 books this week. Linda, who was in my class on Saturday, said that she gets most of her book recommendations from me. I read a book called Finding Audrey, and it's about a young girl who has an anxiety disorder, and it keeps her from going to school. She has been bullied by a group of girls in school, and something horrific has happened to her, and now she is at home, and she has panic attacks and is trying to learn how to function. Then she is seeing a therapist called Dr. Sarah, but she meets a boy who comes over to video game with her brother, and he reaches out in a super kind and loving way to support her and tries to help her through this anxiety that she's going through. And it was just an absolutely lovely book. She starts to have romantic feelings toward him, and there are definitely some ups and downs, but if you've ever been someone with anxiety or you have a child with anxiety, this was really lovely. It was a really good story about someone who is going through that kind of journey. Then I read Made for Love by Alyssa Nutting. I'm not sure why I finished, because it was weird, but I did. It was like one of those things where you couldn't look away. Hazel has moved into a trailer park of senior citizens with her father and Diane, his extremely lifelike sex doll. Life with Hazel's father is strained at best, but her only alternative seems even bleaker. She's just run out on her marriage to Byron Gogol, CEO and founder of Gogol Industries. a monolithic corporation hell-bent on making its products and technologies indispensable in daily life. So it's basically based on Amazon and Google. Hazel put up with being quarantined by Byron in the family compound, her every movement and vital sign tracked. But when he demands to wirelessly connect the two of them via brain chips in a first ever human mind meld, Hazel decides what was once merely irritating has become unbearable. This book was full of sexual innuendo. Her father is just a crazy old man who has this doll. It was so weird, but then I also wanted to find out what happened. Would not necessarily recommend. And then the last one I read was Stolen Life of Colette Marceau by Kristen Harmel. Colette Marceau has been stealing jewels for nearly as long as she can remember, following the centuries-old code of honor instilled in her by her mother, Annabelle. Take only from the cruel and unkind and give to those in need. Never was their family tradition more important than 7 decades earlier during the World War. One night in 1942, it all went wrong. So this is based on World War II. They are in Paris, and she is a jewel thief, and it was remarkable. Very well written, very interesting. I really enjoyed it. I listened to it all the way to coming home from South Dakota in the blizzard. And so, yeah, I will tell you a bit about that story. My son-in-law got in a car accident a week ago on Saturday and totaled my daughter's car. It was a hit and run. He got bumped from behind at a major intersection, and instead of him allowing the car to plow into the intersection, he let it kind of go toward the ditch, and he hit a pole on the back left side, which broke the axle. She did not have a new fancy car, but it only had 83,000 miles on it, and it was what they could afford. So my husband went looking for a car and kind of lost out on a couple in the first couple of days. So that was Saturday. Ross looked Saturday, Sunday, Monday. He found one in Alabama, an old car with low miles. And then he found one here in Minneapolis, and that they were sold right away. You know, cars with low miles that are in good shape go right away. So he saw one in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, 6,000 miles, 2018. And I said, buy it right now. Like, the kids don't care what they're getting. Try to get it for them. And so he looked up the Carfax, and he called the guy and had him hold it for us. And so we had to drive down right away and get it. So Kylie and I got in the car on Wednesday and drove down to Sioux Falls and back. And the winds came up, and we knew that a blizzard, there was a blizzard warnings flashing on the interstate on our way down, that it was starting at 1 o'clock, and we needed to try to beat it to get back. And we went to lunch with my mom and dad and my brother, who goes over and visits my parents every Wednesday at 1. So they had called him and told him that we were going to be in town so we went to Taco John's with my parents, and then we took off for back home, and she was following me in this new car, and we ran into whiteout conditions a couple of times. We were okay on the roads because they were not icy and it had not snowed freshly, but you're on the plains, and there is a geographical ridge that goes across the bottom of southwestern Minnesota, and that is where all the windmills are. I've posted pictures before on Instagram because it's one of the windiest places in the US. And when those winds would come up, the semis were just rocking all over the road. So we're on I-90, and then we're going up US 60 at a diagonal, and the whiteout conditions would happen, and then they would go away for a minute or two, and then we'd see this kind of snow squall. And we probably saw 4 different semis in the ditch. I have some video I'll put in at the end. When I put my phone up on the dash, we stopped somewhere. I put my phone up on the dash so that I could just record some of what we were seeing. And you could see these big white cloud bursts ahead of you where the snow had just got lifted up off the ground, almost like a tornado or, you know, something like that, where you can see it coming and then you'd slow down. Everybody put their flashers on, because then as you go through that snow, you know, for three or 4 seconds, you could see the person's lights in front of you. And yeah, so I'd call her every little while and say, are you doing okay back there? Are we driving too slow or too fast? And but it was really the semis that were having the most trouble. It wasn't fun driving, but the roads weren't terrible. So I kind of lost a day of knitting going. I did knit in the car on the way down. She drove most of the way. But then on the way back, you know, it's 4 hours. So I kind of lost some knitting time. I thought I would have this sleeve done, but we got the car. It's very nice. It's nicer than anything she's had. And she was so thankful that her dad can get out online and is a car guy and knows all this stuff. And the guy that sold it to us was really nice. And they didn't have to pay too much. And well, mom and dad wrote the check for now. And because her car's totaled, they have to get the check from the insurance and all that has to happen. And then they have to get money out of savings. Yeah. So anyway, we were just like, okay, put some money in and get this car, because they need something to drive. And yeah, so that was kind of crazy. Yeah, you know, he did not get hurt. He was not hurt, but he was really shook up after it happened. He felt really bad that he had dropped her off at a speech and debate tournament where she was running the tabulation room for the weekend, and then he was going home and got hit. And the sheriff came and reported the guy, because the guy drove off. I assume the guy didn't think he did any damage because he kind of just slid into him. But you still stop, right? So they were going to check the cameras, the sheriff, to see if they could see who hit him. And now the insurance is kind of being, you know, nasty about how do we know that you really got hit? And Stevie was like, well, because I'm honest and I told the sheriff. So anyway, yeah, but just, it's always something, right? You always have stuff going on. But I did go to the Up North Fiber Retreat, which was lovely. It's absolutely freezing up there, but they have a huge fireplace in the lodge that's just going all weekend. Tiffany stokes the fire and keeps us, she's a volunteer for them, and they just treat everybody really, really well. I think 52 people can go to the event. It will be held now in the fall too. So they're going to have a fall retreat, which will have no teachers, like no real classes, and they will have outdoor activities. So hiking, s'mores, campfires, things like that. So you can go up and stay in a cabin for a long weekend in September. I will not be attending that one because that's my busiest time of year to teach, and I'm gone almost every weekend. But they're going to have 2 a year. So that's the Up North Fiber Retreat run by Jen Scott and Angie Bear. Angie is the owner of the Yarn Cabin in Bemidji, the yarn store. And Jen used to own a yarn store in Bemidji. And so they together do it. And you can follow them online or on Instagram to find out information about upcoming retreats. They can't have any more people in the lodge. I mean, it's packed the way it is, so it will never get bigger. And they do have a waiting list where they could have 3 times more people, but they say that, you know, for them it's less about money and more about community, and they just want to keep it small and so that they know everybody, and so it will be a situation where there will probably always be a wait list. And not everybody wants to go to northern Minnesota in January, but we do. I had 5 of us in my car, and so we all went up together that day. We stopped at both yarn stores. We went to Yarn Cabin, and then we went up the road to Fiddlesticks, and then we had supper, and then we went out to the resort for the weekend. Yeah, we had 2 cabins that were adjoining, so they had a double door in between, like you would have in a hotel room if you had an adjoining room. So there were 3 bedrooms on one side, 3 bedrooms on the other side. 2 full baths on each side, and then a half bath. So everybody kind of has their own space as far as bedrooms and bathrooms go. We both had a full kitchen. We both had a little family room with a fireplace, but we could go in between and, you know, spend time with each other. So that was lovely. We really had a lovely setup there. A few people went snowshoeing out on the lake, but it was bitter cold. They came back in and said that their faces got exfoliated because it was so windy and cold out on the lake, especially on Saturday. Really windy. I think that's the day that those guys went out and snowshoed and then tried to come back in. And yeah, it was, yeah, very cold. But very fortunate that I have a group of friends that like to get together and go to events like that. So I will be leaving on Thursday for sweater camp. And that'll be a completely different kind of event. 225 people, I think. And then people who are online, people who just get day passes. They bring teachers in via big television units from all over the country and the world. Yeah, so I'm just kind of excited about that. I feel like I just got back from one. Now I'm going to turn around and go back to another one. I've watched a couple of things on TV that were fun. I'm following this Carolyn Winkler on YouTube. She's really fun. She's an interior designer, but she's very quirky. And she talks about her relationships with people and how she has designed her own apartment, and now she is engaged and they're moving in together, and they're renting a townhome in Washington, D.C. And she just, she's very off the cuff, very funny. She was an actress for about 10 years, and now she does interior design on YouTube. She has 1 million subscribers, so she's very popular. She's young and very vivacious, and she just makes me laugh and smile. And it's like one of those situations where you just want to sit down and not have your heart broken by watching the news and seeing, you know, it's just so devastating. So yeah, I would recommend her a lot, Carolyn Winkler. And then I watched Next Generation Chef, and that took place at the Culinary Institute of America in New York, I have been there. I've eaten there. We took a tour when we went to Rhinebeck one year, a number of years ago. It's a beautiful campus. And so they brought in all these young chefs, and they had a competition that was on Netflix. It was very good to watch. And then I started watching Love on the Spectrum. I think there are 4 seasons. And then yesterday I was watching, I wanted to watch the new season of The Last Thing He Told Me. And that's with Jennifer Garner. And her husband disappears, and she's left with his daughter, who doesn't like her very much, and you don't know what's going on. And I couldn't remember it, and I apparently watched it in 2023. I don't know why it took 2.5 years for the new season to come out, but it came up on my screen that I had watched it in 2023, and I thought, well, I'm just gonna watch the beginning and see if I remember. I didn't remember it. I read the book, but I didn't remember it, so I sat and watched that last night till pretty late. So we're gonna go watch the football games now. The playoff games are happening. I'm gonna knit on this sleeve and try to get it finished. I hope that this finds you all well. Sending out a big hug to everyone in Minnesota, everyone who is dealing with fear and uncertainty right now. So come in for a big hug. I love you all. Thanks for watching. Thanks for always being supportive. And I'll see you in a couple of weeks.